Okay, so we should probably start with introduction. We always do this at the beginning. So would you like to introduce yourself? Could you tell us something about who you are and your career journey?
Yeah, no, of course. So I think where to start is I have actually wanted to be an artist since I was 2 years old. So I was that child that was just drawing on anything that I could find. And for my BA, well, my parents encouraged me to study graphic design. So instead of, studying art, I went into graphic design. And then after that, I actually studied for my MA. And that's when I moved to San Francisco and I lived there for 12 years. And what I think is just really interesting is that in my master's program, because I truly believe that anything that you can imagine, you can create. So while in my master's program, other people were just building websites, I was exploring how to merge like the physical and digital worlds. I wanted our environments to like adapt and flex to our conversations. And so I spent about 18 months building a smart and connected space that kind of really that experience, I guess, kind of redefined who I was as a creative thinker. And after that, I went into the agency world and I just haven't left. So in San Francisco, I worked with some really great brands like Nike and Philips at RGA and McCann. And then I moved to the UK where I just continued to work with other great brands like Bang& Olufsen, Burberry, British Airways. And fast forward to today, I'm at Tribal where I'm the chief experience officer and I look after the CX and EX practice.
Cool. So you did your master's in graphic design as well?
I did my master's in computer arts in what used to be called multimedia design.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting. So you said that you were always drawn to art since you were a little child, and then you decided to go into graphic design. What actually made you to choose like a bit of the more commercial side of art, to put it this way?
You're asking all the great questions. So my grandfather was an artist from when he was like 30 to the day he died, and my parents wanted me to follow in that footsteps because I had the talent, but they wanted me to make money. So it was that's why I said it was my parents that encouraged me. I would have gone and become an illustrator, but they encouraged me to go that route, and I'm so glad they did because it just opened up a different way to express what I was thinking in a new format.
Hmm. And right now you're at Tribal, you're a chief experience officer. How would you evaluate the journey there in that company?
Yeah, I mean that's why I always start with kind of like where my master's degree is, because I think that when a lot of times when people look at designers, and there's so many different shapes and sizes of designers, it's really about the way that we solve problems. And I feel very lucky that in my journey throughout my career, that whether it was at RGA working on Nike innovation, or whether it was working with the Singapore team on Philips, or whether it was working on charity, like Boys and Girls of America, or even here working with, the different brands, it's just, I've been on this amazing journey to solve problems, and I feel very lucky that the people I work with, it wasn't just about come up with the best idea. It was really about how do we solve a problem? How do we make it meaningful? How do we impact lives and influence brands to do so as well?
So I guess we can dive into today's main topic, and the first one is emotion design. And what do you actually mean by emotion design? I know that it's your like area of specialization, and you're very passionate about it.
Emotional design is not a new topic at all, and emotions have always been really key because we as humans, like, we make our decisions based on our emotions, and I think sometimes even more than we'd like to admit.
Mhm.
But most people would describe emotional design as creating products that people love, but this targets only emotions in a one-dimensional way. And so for us to really design like moments that matter and last, we need to experiment with an emotional lens that is multi-layered, because we're multi-layered as humans. So today, I think that emotional design isn't about creating products that people love. It's about creating experiences around people. And what I mean by this is like experiences that understand our emotional states and cultural contexts as well. They recognize people, and their experiences that really look, I think, underneath the surface, and they design with compassion and curiosity. And so when we do that, that's when we connect people
Hmm. Hmm.
or connect with people, sorry.
Hmm. So this approach, how actually build it into the CX journeys? How is this implemented?
People's emotions actually should be considered throughout the entire design process. But I think a lot of times people only consider it when they have like a final product or a product that they're or service that they're testing. And so, for example, when you look at like the discovery and like define phase, when you're unlocking the right problem to solve, you need to not only understand, customer needs and behaviors and motivations, which we're at this point pretty good about kind of getting that data, but we also need to look at that emotional lens. And it's important to not guess. A lot of times when people, sometimes people do look at emotion, but they make a guess. And it's important not to guess, but also important to map the emotions and tie those to customers' actions and their mindset so that you can then identify where the biggest pain points and
Hmm.
opportunities for change are. And then another area is like when you're looking at concepting, you need to remind yourself of that, of how people feel and why. And in that kind of in those beginning stages, that research that you had, and also look to how you want them to feel. For instance, an example that I like to give a lot is like if you're working on a booking experience for a train company, some people traveling will be traveling for a stag do, and so they'll be in celebration mode, while others will be traveling due to a death in the family, which is a very different emotion. So what we need to be mindful of is the variety of emotions so that we can create the right experience for individuals as
Hmm.
well as groups.
I have so many questions. What kind of emotions are you looking at? Because as you just mentioned two examples, and based on that, how do the journeys differ? Because when somebody needs to make a booking online, I guess it looks the same for everyone, right? Or how does this make this an impact?
And I think this is a great question, by the way. And I just spoke at South by Southwest about this, and we were doing workshops with people. And it's not about always designing for all the different emotions. It's about, especially, and that's why I loved your question about when do you, it's about identifying in the beginning when you're solving for a problem, identifying what emotions people have, and then realizing how you need to flex. So, for
Hmm.
example, with the train, if you have you don't have information about why people are traveling on the train, then maybe you just have like an experience that doesn't necessarily celebrate or provide that, you just act human. But say you have some information because you realize the stack do, then you can even add little moments of celebration. Or if someone's family member has died, then maybe you can offer them an extra coffee or tea, or place them in an area in the train where maybe that much noise isn't, so they can be on their own. So it's being mindful of those
Hmm.
and the emotions that we use. So we look to we're not recreating emotions. Like I said, we emotions psychologists have like studied for
Hmm.
years. So a lot of times what we do is just give the designers the emotional wheel, and it can be confusing because there are multiple ones. But if you look at just the core emotions, you kind of look at those and just make sure to identify those and be aware of that. And then leverage that, like I said, not just in the upfront research, because what you're trying to do is, in some cases, is think about how you can relieve someone of pressure or make a situation less stressful or calming. So it's what we do is we use those emotions, just
Hmm.
the emotions that are have been identified for years.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess the tricky part is to find out how the customers actually feel or like what's going on in their lives, right? And
And that's what's fantastic that
yeah.
you said, is because that's why what is so important is that you talk to real customers, that you go out and do surveys with real customers, because that's where we get that lens
Hmm.
of like why, and the why is just as important as the feeling or the emotion.
Hmm. Hmm. When I go back to the example of booking a train, for example, and to find out, you think it's worth maybe to ask them like for a reason to travel, or to kind of, or how do you find, if I can ask
Yeah, so
information?
I think that this is where, if you look at like, just even like I'll give an example of finance. So when we did a payment in the past, you normally would never ask like why you're making a payment.
Hmm.
But what's beautiful is some of these more modern kind of banking apps and stuff. Now when you do a payment to someone, you can add an emoji, or you can, you can add. So this is what's happening, is that there can be these small little things that we can add into the systems or into the experiences
Hmm.
to actually add that. So I think when it comes to booking experience, does every booking experience need to include asking people? No, at the end of the day, we still need it to be useful, quick, and easy. But there might be a question there just to provide a little bit more of that connection with people.
Hmm.
And some people might ignore it, some people might engage, and that's where you can then have a more emotional connection with the customer at that point.